we have multiple trades that we are currently watching unfold and ones that are rumored. We're going to dive into the top trade rumors and deals that have gotten done now. So let's jump right into the NBA trade rumors, starting with James Harden. He is right now the biggest name on the trade block. Excuse me. James Harden declined a record $50 million per year deal. It was a 2-year, $103 million extension that the Houston Rockets were giving him, as he requested a trade to the Brooklyn Nets. It's also believed that the Philadelphia 76ers were also on his trade destination list. With that being said, do you believe if Harden got his way that a Kyrie James Harden backcourt could coexist and become championship level talent? Because I don't think if it works, I can guarantee that they would be championship level.
There's definitely a shot that this works out, but I would bet that it doesn't. I think there's too much personality here. I already think there's too much personality in Brooklyn with Kyrie and KD. I don't think that adding James Harden would do you any justice. The ball can only be in one person's hand at a time. If it's in Kevin Durant's hand for 70% of the time, Kyrie's going to want it the other 30. So I don't know where James Harden fits into this picture. And especially, Kyrie is not an off-ball guard. James Harden's not an off-ball guard. I don't know who's going to be controlling the floor for this team if James Harden is there. So there's a lot of conflict there, along with the personality and the prima donnas on this team. I mean, you've got a brand new head coach that's got to deal with all of this. I don't think it's going to work out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to say the least, but Kyrie and Harden together is a whole hell of a lot of personality, a lot of on the ball guard, a lot of knee ball. On top of that, you're gonna have to feed Kevin Durant at some point. It'll be very interesting, and don't forget they have some guy by the name of DeAndre Jordan at center, who's going to be looking for his own as well. So there is a whole hell of a lot of player in Brooklyn. If this deal were to come to fruition, basically the Brooklyn Nets would be gutting their entire roster and playing with 4 players, because to get Harden away from the Houston Rockets, even though he is on his way out anyway, he is going to command a whole hell of a lot. And now they are introduced with competition, because it looks like the Boston Celtics have entered the fray for James Harden. It looks like Danny Ainge is looking to trade away Kemba Walker in an attempt to obtain assets that he could then trade with Gordon Hayward in return for James Harden to pair with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Daniel Tice moving forward, along with Marcus Smart. So that would be the core, would be the 4 of them plus James Harden, which to me, as a Boston Celtics fan, sounds incredible, but the more I think about it, the less I want to gut my team of the players and the relationships that they have built over the last few years. I can't imagine basically gutting this team to add a player, a 31-year-old James Harden.
Yeah, when I look back at the bubble play and when the Celtics got healthy against the Raptors, I think that even without Gordon Hayward, they were playing their best ball. That was the first time I saw true chemistry between them, and they were just exhausted going to that Miami Heat series. So I think that if this team, as it is now, gets more reps with each other and continues to play with each other, they can be just as good or better than if James Harden were here. So I don't see it worth the Celtics mortgaging their future in order to get one aged James Harden, who, yeah, he's still an amazing player, but how many more years is he going to give you, and how many rings is that going to bring? I mean, is it worth it? I don't think so.
Right. I think this deal more suits Brooklyn in the sense that they are in a win now mode. Obviously, signing Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant is very evident of that fact, and their ability to move forward and have a longer championship window that's going to be out the window. They are in win now mode. They have the pieces to get it done. If they add James Harden, I think it just compounds that fact, and they will have this for the next few years, and then after that, it's going to be rebuild city once again.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. The Nets, you know what? This is the only spot that really makes sense for it. And if James Harden doesn't want to be with you, he's going to make it known. As a Celtics fan, I don't want James Harden if he's not outwardly saying, I want to be there. And he's only saying that about the Nets. So the Nets seem like the only suitors. If I were any other team in the NBA, I wouldn't even be touching James Harden because I don't need that personality on my team if I don't have to have it. So
No,
I'd be
for
staying.
sure.
I'd really be staying away from him.
Yeah. On the other side of the coin, the Houston Rockets are also looking to offload Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook, had only had one season in Houston after, pairing him with James Harden. They got rid of Mike D'Antoni. They have an entire culture change happening, entire shift of philosophy on the court happening, and that includes axing their two best players and trying to regain draft picks and assets to build for the future. With that being said, we have seen two major suitors pop up for Russell Westbrook, and we'll discuss those both very quickly. The first would be the New York Knicks. They have emerged as the number one contender for Russell Westbrook. My only concern with this move is that I don't know if they have what it takes to swing that trade without giving up one of those major core pieces that they're trying to keep intact, whether it's Dennis Smith Jr., whether it's RJ Barrett, or if it, whoever the case it is, they need to keep those guys intact and add Russell Westbrook on top of it, because other than that, it would be a major loss for the Knicks, and they'd be kind of right back at square one.
Yeah, I think in all honesty, the Knicks make the most sense. I think that not only does Russell Westbrook need to be in a big market like New York, he needs to be on a team where he is the guy. He can control the ball the entire game. That's where he thrived in OKC, was when everybody was gone, he was the only guy and he was scoring triple doubles every single game. That's what he thrives in. That's the environment he loves. He doesn't need too many people around him to be great. And I think he's at his best when there are less people around him. So if you keep those guys around him that are already there, and you add Russell Westbrook, I think that the New York Knicks could definitely be a big team in the Eastern Conference.
It should also be noted that the New York Knicks have been in contact with the Celtics for Kemba Walker, so it does look like they are trying to acquire a top point guard in a fashion of a trade. That way they can start building in that facet. So whether it's Russell Westbrook or Kemba Walker, looks like the Knicks are going to try to get something done as soon as possible for a top tier point guard. With that being said, going back to Russell Westbrook, the other trade rumor that we've been hearing, and this one's starting to heat up a lot more right now, is that the Washington Wizards are looking at basically a player for player trade where they would send point guard John Wall to Houston, and then Houston would then in return send Russell Westbrook to Washington. With that being said, Houston says, no, that's not enough for Russell Westbrook. John Wall has an injury history. We want to kind of offset that injury history with a few more possible draft assets or role players that you guys are willing to trade. So that's what's holding up this deal. Washington's looking for a 1-for-1 player swap. But I think that would be very interesting. Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal together in Washington would create a very interesting, almost redundant dynamic duo.
Yeah, Russell in DC would be interesting. I think that it could work out just like it would with the Knicks because he is the guy. Bradley Beal is a role player, and although he's great, he is still beneath Russell Westbrook, and so Russell Westbrook still has all of that ball time. I just don't know how this trade gets done, especially when Washington is saying we only want to give up John Wall who we are telling you, take our word for it, he is just as good as he used to be. And the Houston Rockets, they're trying to get as much draft capital or as many future stars as possible. So I just don't see the two figuring out a deal that works for them before another suitor comes along and strikes a deal with the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Again, the Rockets are attempting to acquire as many draft assets as possible. They want whatever whatever culture change they're trying to bring in. They want an entirely new on-court regime as well, because and that was signified again. They moved on from Robert Covington as well to acquire draft assets. Robert Covington, although he's not a massive name, he was part of the old culture. He fit the D'Antoni system. He was a bench player for them in that aspect. But the Rockets sent Covington to Portland with the Trailblazers. They got back Trevor Ariza. They got the 16th overall pick and a 2021 protected first round pick. The protection hasn't been noted just yet, but a lot of trade assets back for a player like Robert Covington.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, we have a lot of trade rumors and trades that have already happened. So I want to back off the rumors. I want to just quickly address a few trades that have actually happened. That way we can get back to the rumors and kind of break those down. But the first one, and probably the most notable, the Oklahoma City Thunder traded future Hall of Fame point guard Chris Paul and guard Abdel Nader to the Phoenix Suns in return for forward Kelly Oubre, guard Ricky Rubio, guard Ty Jerome, guard Jalen Lecque, and a 2022 first-round pick. To me, you have CP3, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton, and to me, like, that is an incredible big three that you have to work with. Now you just need two role players, 2 3-and-D guys that can run up and down the floor with and make shots when they need to. But Devin Booker is going to be the scorer that you need. Ayton is the defensive stalwart, and you have CP3, who's now your floor general. This is the exact way that you need to build a championship caliber team. And while I'm not sure that they're at that level just yet, the move to acquire CP3, his leadership and his talent, especially this late in his career, are going to help the Suns become contenders and get into the conversation. They were so close getting into the playoffs last year. They won out in the bubble and still missed it by a half a game. Adding CP3 is going to enhance their ability to win more regular season games. That way, it doesn't come down to a last second, Hail Mary, if you will. But sorry, it's Phoenix. I had to. But it just shows you that the Suns are in a win now mode. They want to show their fans, but specifically Devin Booker, that they are willing to do whatever it takes to keep him in Phoenix. They don't want to move on from him. They want him to understand that they will do whatever it takes to win and keep him happy. And I think this goes a long way in doing just that.
Absolutely. I love what the Suns are doing right now. You need to do anything and everything you possibly can to keep Devin Booker right where he is, because he is the guy to have. I absolutely love Devin Booker for multiple reasons. This is one of the best players in the NBA right now. He is a great guy, and to have CP3 there now, he's going to facilitate not only to him but to everybody else. I think that CP3 was doing nothing last year, or he was doing everything last year on a team that was he was doing everything on a team that was going nowhere. And to see a guy of CP3's caliber be thrown around the NBA the last few years, it's not doing him justice, because he is playing at such an elite level still. But when you see a guy like this tossed around the league, you think that he's washed. Well, CP3 is not washed in the slightest, and this team is for real. I think they are one piece away now from being true contenders in the West.
I think Houston gave up on CP3 too quickly. Obviously, they were given the shiny Russell Westbrook instead of CP3, and that's what they went with. But it ultimately led to their
we can
demise.
get into Houston at another point in time, but we can talk about it tomorrow on the live stream.
For sure.
But I think Houston has not, like, the culture there was a problem, and I think that's the reason all of the players there didn't work out. It was merely a culture issue, and that's why they're all going to work out other places.
For sure. But just to get back on track here, on top of the CP3 trade, the Oklahoma City Thunder also traded point guard Dennis Schroeder to the Los Angeles Lakers in return for shooting guard Danny Green, the number 28 overall pick in this year's draft. Those are two major assets that the Thunder bring back. And just so you understand exactly what the Thunder have been up to, I want to list this off so you guys understand. And what I can do is if you go to our Twitter, it's posted there as well. But this is what the Thunder have for the next 6 years in the draft. 2020, they have the Nuggets first round pick, the Lakers first round pick. 2021, they have their own first, the Heat first, and a Houston pick swap. 2022, they have their own first, the Clippers first, and the Phoenix Suns first. 2023, they have their own first, Clippers pick swap, Heat first. 2024, their own first, the Clippers first, the Houston Rockets first. And in 2026, they have their own first, the Clippers first, and the Houston Rockets first. They have an immense amount of talent. You thought Danny Ainge back in Boston when he garnered all those assets back from the Brooklyn Nets back then and swindled them with KG and Paul Pierce. What they have going here, Sam Presti and the Oklahoma City Thunder, this is an absolutely incredible job that they have just acquired so many picks. Now, obviously, these picks have to hit, and they have to get, a lot of them are going to be later on. But what we're seeing with these teams that have so many draft picks is that they're going to bundle these together. They're going to move up in the draft. They're going to bundle them for stars that are falling out of favor in their current cities. A lot of moving pieces here, and they have every bit of ammunition to get any possible deal done.
Yeah. Oklahoma City is in prime position to be great in the future, and I think Houston's doing the same thing right now. I think there's a few different organizations that are really trying to get ready for the future, and Oklahoma City is really laying the groundwork for what it looks like to be in a full rebuild.
Yeah, for sure. But and again, we'll get into more depth tomorrow. What I want on the live stream, so make sure you check that out. We will be answering questions as well. But I want to continue on with exactly what we have here because there's still a lot more to get to. Drew Holiday, the point guard for the former Pelicans point guard, traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. But the deal that the Bucks gave up for Drew Holiday was a bit concerning and essentially made us shake our heads a little bit. The Pelicans traded Drew Holiday to the Bucks for guard Eric Bledsoe, guard George Hill, 3 first-round draft picks, and 2 pick swaps on top of it. So that's 5 possible draft picks, plus Eric Bledsoe, who's an incredible point guard, and George Hill, who's a great role player. Do you think that they gave up too much?
Oh, absolutely. Even if you look at it, Eric Bledsoe was the 3rd best player on this team, and now you go get Drew Holiday, who's again the 3rd best player on this team. Like I don't know where you're improving to give up that much for a guy that's not going to give you that much more in return.
Right.
The trade just makes no sense in every aspect.
I don't think that Drew Holiday is that much more of an upgrade over the combination of George Hill and Eric Bledsoe. And you may call me crazy, but I know he is a great talent, but their combined ability is packaged into one, and then all of the assets that you gave up on top of it. I mean, New Orleans, those 5 picks, turned into the 2020 first round pick for the Bucks, which is through the Indiana Pacers. So they have the Pacers pick. Then in 2024, they have the right to swap. 2025, they have an unprotected first round pick. 2026, they have a right to swap picks if they so choose. And 2027, they have another unprotected first round pick. This is all under the assumption that the Milwaukee Bucks continue to keep Giannis and continue to play at such a championship caliber level, or competition level, that those picks maybe don't matter. I mean, I can't predict the future, and you're telling me 7 years down the line, the Bucks expect to be in championship caliber form? I just don't buy that. I think they gave up the farm for something much, much less.
Well, they gave it up for hope and a prayer that Giannis extends with them. I mean, what happens if Giannis decides that I'm going to give it this year? If the team doesn't go any further than they did last year, I'm leaving. I'm out. And then they're screwed. Then they have nobody. They don't have a big star. Then it's all Chris Middleton. He becomes the star of the team. I mean, they are gambling their future for the hope that they do better and Giannis decides to sign a contract extension.
It'll be interesting because, he does have to make that decision. Apparently, they are offering him the Supermax a year early. Even so, I just can't imagine that. I think he's going to take his time and he's going to truly assess whether he believes the Milwaukee Bucks can win a championship with the way they are currently constructed. Obviously, they just lost Robin Lopez, who opted out of his player option. So they're down another big man. They have a very aged Brook Lopez, and then Chris Middleton. And besides Giannis, that's pretty much it. So it's Drew Holiday, Giannis, Chris Middleton, and an aged Brook Lopez. If you're telling me that's got to compete with the likes of Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Jordan, I'm going to take Brooklyn every step of the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's as far as trades that have been completed, that's what we have so far. I want to go back to the rumor mill and just dissect some of these rumors that we've heard. These will go much quicker, but the idea around this is that we still have some big names that are not happy with where they are, or teams that are looking to obtain draft assets that will allow them to, basically rebuild or retool. With that being said, the Indiana Pacers, who we just talked about, they're looking to move on from their stars, and starting with Miles Turner. It's been rumored that the Boston Celtics have been in contact. Danny Ainge has been in contact with the Indiana Pacers on a Miles Turner deal centered around Miles Turner and Doug McDermott in exchange for Gordon Hayward, Daniel Tice, and all 3 2020 first-round picks that the Celtics currently own. Do you see this trade happening, and do you like this better than the possible James Harden to Boston trade?
Oh, I think this, without a doubt, this is a much better trade than going after James Harden, because you fill a need that you have right now, and that's getting a big man in Boston. That's something they've struggled with over the last few years. They have nobody to compete against Giannis or Bam Adebayo. You need somebody to help compete against them, and that's exactly what Miles Turner does. I think that giving up guys like Gordon Hayward, I talked about it earlier. He wasn't there for the Raptors series, and they made it through just fine. When he was back for the Miami Heat series, his impact was negligible. I think that Daniel Tice, he'll obviously be replaced by Miles Turner. And then the first round picks that the Celtics have, they're mid to late round first picks, so they're not going to really get somebody who can compete for them right now, that's going to help them right now. It's going to be developmental players. They already have a lot of depth. They don't need more depth. I think that these picks are kind of just a waste for them. There's no use that they have for them, and that Indiana can make a lot more of these picks. So I think the trade makes a lot of sense to happen.
Yeah, I think that I think the Celtics would be would be hard pressed to not make this deal happen. In fact, I think they should try to push it even further and see what it'll take to add Victor Oladipo to the mix. Because if you can add a player, some of the younger pieces that you have and some of your rotational pieces, as long as you keep the core of Marcus Smart, Kemba Walker, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum together, and then you add Miles Turner, Victor Oladipo, and Doug McDermott, I think you are in an extremely enviable position where you have a 1 through 5 that you can truly compete with, and you have depth pieces that can come off the bench and provide their own amount of scoring and their own ability to just carry the load should they need to. So I think this trade from head to toe makes more sense than not for both sides. I think this would be the number one trade that the Celtics and the Pacers would want to look to complete.
Absolutely.
All right. So if the Miles Turner trade did fall through, it looks like the Boston Celtics have kicked the tires on a possible Steven Adams trade. Adams would be the only option left for the Celtics to upgrade the front court, where they found a massive weakness last year in the playoffs, specifically against Bam Adebayo, where he shredded them. Daniel Tice was no match for him. They need somebody who is an actual defensive stalwart underneath the basket that can protect the rim at all costs and isn't unwilling to do the dirty work that needs to be done and can do it, because we all know Marcus Smart's willing to do it. He just doesn't have the size to get it done, especially against a player like Bam Adebayo. But overall, I think Steven Adams would be a good consolation prize for the Celtics. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he's an upgrade over Daniel Tice, so I think this still makes sense for the Celtics. He's going to add tremendous value to the team, and I think that Brad Stevens will make him work into the system. So I think that this makes sense. It's obviously not their first choice, and he'll come at a much cheaper cost, but I still like the trade because it is an improvement over Daniel Tice.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and Steven Adams wouldn't cost nearly as much it would to get Miles Turner. Steven Adams is an aged center. He's had plenty of time throughout the league. So
it's funny how we call these guys aged and they're in their late 20s. I mean, they're right around our age, and we're saying they're old men,
right? But the fact remains is that when you're talking about professional athletes,
especially in basketball.
Window. Right. There's a specific window in which they can compete at a top level. And it looks like Steven Adams is toward the end of his window. His window seems to be closing. And just for the record, I'm looking this up right now. He's 27 years old out of New Zealand, even though he looks like he's 45. So maybe New Zealand isn't the best place for him. But all right, so let's move forward. We have 3 more trade rumors to get to. Andre Drummond opted into his $28.7 million player option for the 2020-21 season. We talked about this a little bit before when we were going through the draft picks. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. Do you think he will get traded before the season starts? If so, where? And do you see him getting traded at all?
No, I don't see Andre Drummond getting traded. I think that he's going to stay right where he is in Cleveland. I think that it depends on really who they draft tomorrow or tonight when you're listening to this. So if they get a forward, I think that he stays. But if somehow they're able to swindle their way into getting James Wiseman, I think that you could see them potentially at that point trading Andre Drummond to Golden State or whatever it takes to get that number, what that top 3 pick to get James Wiseman. So that's the only situation I see is it's either Andre Drummond for the Cavaliers or James Wiseman.
Yeah, I just don't see how the numbers would end up working out for the Warriors in this situation. They don't have the cap space to take on a $28.7 million contract for 1 year. And since it's a player option, I personally don't believe that it can be edited, nor do I believe Andre Drummond would want it to be changed in any way, shape, or form.
Right, but yeah, I mean the NBA is interesting where you have these 3, 4, 5 team trades that happen. So I could see a 3-team trade where somebody gets Drummond, Golden State gets some picks, and then James Wiseman ends up for in Cleveland.
It's very possible. All right. One more out of Washington, the Washington Wizards. This is a potential trade that somebody brought to our attention. We wanted to address it. This would revolve around Bradley Beal. So the Timberwolves would get Bradley Beal. Excuse me. The Washington Wizards would then get the number 1 overall pick in tonight's NBA draft. James Johnson, Jarrett Culver, and Jake Lyman. Personally, I think Bradley Beal is a great talent. I think even though he's a little older, I just think that I don't think he will fit exactly what the Timberwolves are looking to get done. It'll be interesting because we've seen him do it without John Wall in Washington. I want to see if he can do it without John Wall somewhere else. So I'd be intrigued to say yes, let's get that done, especially because even though we both agree that Anthony Edwards should be the number 1 overall draft pick, I don't think that Bradley Beal, I don't think any of these guys come close to what Bradley Beal can offer you right now.
No, I think that if I were the Timberwolves, I'd consider it. I would, you know what? No, if I'm the Timberwolves, I'm not giving up this number 1 pick. I think there's too much talent here. I'm going to take the younger player that I can develop and he'll conform to my system. I'm not taking the bona fide star in Bradley Beal who's going to come in thinking that he's going to play his style of ball and not do what fits the team's interest and what's best for the team. So I think that I'd rather get a guy like Anthony Edwards who is younger. He'll be there much longer than Bradley Beal will. And I think that I'd rather Anthony Edwards provides a lot more potential. His ceiling is a lot higher than Bradley Beal's is. I think Beal has already peaked at what he is, and although he has a higher floor, I'd rather take the bigger risk on a guy like Anthony Edwards or even LaMelo Ball.
You're a gambling man, aren't you?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to digest here. Again, we're going to talk more about these during our live stream. Make sure you tune in for that. But then just to move forward, we have the second potential trade that somebody brought to us, and that was the Warriors get Blake Griffin, and the Pistons receive the number 2 overall pick. They receive Andrew Wiggins and center Kevin Looney. That's a whole hell of a lot to give up for Blake Griffin, an aged Blake Griffin at that. But Blake Griffin would provide them with some defensive power. His ability in the pick and roll game, like we talked about with James Wiseman, would definitely help them. I think he more fits their win now scenario than somebody like James Wiseman does. I can definitely see a trade like this going forward.
I actually don't see this trade going forward because to me, Blake Griffin, he's not going to be able to keep the pace that the Warriors have. He's not going to, he's aged. He's been,
he did it in Los Angeles with the Clippers.
How many years ago was that though? This is a guy who has dropped off. He's still a great player, but he can't move at the speed at which he used to. He can't handle some of these bigger guys that he's going to have to. I mean, if you have Blake Griffin against Anthony Davis, I'm going to take Anthony Davis the majority of the time. So I think that Blake Griffin, he'll be an improvement over what they have now, but he is definitely not worth giving up all of that for Golden State.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot for him, but I do believe, like I said, Blake Griffin helps them for their win now mentality more than somebody like James Wiseman does, who is going to be a little more of a project player. He's going to have to get used to the speed of the NBA, the strength of NBA centers. Blake Griffin, can compete with some of these big guys, even though he's not the tallest of them. He's definitely as strong as they are. And, he can do it both offensively and defensively. All right. So for trade rumors, that's everything that we have. We broke down all of the trades that have currently happened, all of the trades that are rumored to happen. Before we move on, I do want to say this is just again, we are recording on Tuesday. Per Shams Charania, I butcher his name every time, so I apologize for that. This is the latest on the James Harden saga. Currently, there is not much interest from the Houston Rockets on their side of the coin on a deal with the Brooklyn Nets unless it includes one of the two following players, Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant. That is what they are asking for in return from James Harden because they don't have much else to give up like Boston does. On the other side of the coin, Philly is currently not inclined to include Ben Simmons in trade talks for James Harden, which basically takes them out of the running for James Harden as well. So if you were to narrow it down, it would look like Boston is the only potential suitor unless Brooklyn were then to say goodbye to Kyrie Irving, because I don't see them moving on from Kevin Durant. I see them moving on from Kyrie Irving.
I can't imagine that Brooklyn moves on from the team they've waited over a year now to see in action. I mean, the wait it's gonna be worth it, and you just have to be a little bit more patient. I'd rather have Kyrie than James Harden on the Brooklyn Nets, and I think that would work better with Kevin Durant. And I think that there could potentially be other suitors for James Harden. So I don't think that the Celtics are the only option available for the Houston Rockets to offload James Harden. This is going to be a developing story as we get closer to the draft and as the Houston Rock as the start of the draft hits, because I could see possibly the Timberwolves, trying to move in and get him, or some other team that, I could see the Chicago Bulls trying to move in and get him. There's plenty of teams that need a guy like James Harden, and I think that we're going to see a lot more potential trades for James Harden as we get closer to the start of the NBA draft.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be very interesting. And definitely this is, the number one priority to keep an eye on. If you're an NBA fan looking at all of these possible scenarios, James Harden will set the tone for the rest of the trade market to kind of follow through and see where that goes.